Welcome back to Professionally Casual Gamers. This is part 2 of our Game of the Year discussion episode. For this part, we'll be discussing and awarding Game of the Year in 2020. We're actually adding a new person to the mix. We couldn't get Ryan Seacrest, so we're settling for Brendan McCormick. Brendan, since this is your premiere on the podcast, tell us about yourself.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Happy to
Brendan, since you're new to this podcast and this is your premiere, could you tell us about yourself?
sure thing. And hopefully, I don't get a little bit of stage fright. This being this
You're fine. We love you.
podcast, I'm not too sure. So, hey, everyone. I actually work as a game designer for my career. So I'm always a gamer at heart, and I want to keep that going. In career.
So, Brendan's perspective is much better than ours because he actually makes games, so it's okay.
True. He's on the corporate end of it. And also, he's a avid Metroids and Samus fan. Do you want to give the lowdown on that? It's a pretty cool fun fact.
I am sadly just a over-the-top Metroid.
There is a lot of disappointment, I guess, recently.
I will always be excited to hear new Metroid news. But yeah, so like Metroid is my favorite franchise. Nintendo in general is kind of the platform of choice in which I enjoy all the games that they deliver. Not to say I don't branch out a little bit. I'm also an Xbox gamer, PC gamer, VR. Sony, I should admit that I don't. The last Sony console I had was actually the PS2. Funny.
Okay, great console.
Yeah, and I know I am missing out on some great titles. And eventually, I'm just going to keep my eyes out for like a PS4. Maybe wait it out a little bit longer for a PS5 to go on sale, which will probably be like Black Friday of next year.
Oh man, a whole year.
Hey, I got plenty of other games to keep me busy till then, though. You know.
Yeah, we were just
I'll be
telling
patient.
Ralph. I have like 5 games on deck to play because he's letting me borrow Spider-Man Miles Morales. So
Very nice.
going into 2021, guns loaded here for video games.
Awesome. Go ahead.
No, I think that's about it. I'm a gamer at heart. I like to make games, play and make.
Oh yeah, happy to have you, man.
That's fantastic. Alex, you want to tee off the game of the year discussion for us? How are we doing this?
Okay, so let's name off the nominees. So this is part 2 of the episode. We still have Cone here.
Yeah, we do it.
As good as always. And then, per usual, the boys, Ralph and Alex, right? So we've got some nominees, and I think we're not just going to settle for one solid game of the year. We're going to have a list. Do you want to do like the top 4 games of the year?
I think
but order will matter,
Yeah.
right? So 1 will obviously be better than 2, 3, 4, etc. So there'll be some consolation prizes, I guess.
Consolation prizes.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So Final Fantasy VII Remake will obviously be number 1, and then it'll just be a fight for 2, 3, and 4.
Sure. I think what would be good is to just every person pushes one that they think is game of the year worthy, and we'll go from there.
Well, I don't know. We can have organic discussions, but how about this? Let's start by listing, Ralph, if you can, the nominees for Game of the Year, and then we'll have a roundtable discussion and go through each of them.
Okay. All right. So I just want to list off all of the Game of the Years, and then we'll go through them one by one.
Let's do it.
For Game of the Year, we have Half-Life Alyx, Last of Us 2,
Boo.
Persona 5 Royal,
Boo.
Ghost of Tsushima, Animal Crossing New Horizons,
Boo.
and Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
So which one else do you like?
So Brendan, you're the one that is going to kick off this entire conversation. Why do you think Half-Life Alyx deserves to be Game of the Year?
So first of all, out of that entire list, I've only played 2 of those games. But
so I've played Half-Life 2. That was one in the orange box, right?
Yeah.
That was on back in like the 360.
Yeah. And so like generally from like Half-Life, I know like there's like a huge freaking cult following.
Yeah,
I know.
for number 3.
Yeah, like while this wasn't number 3, this was like, okay, this is something. And so this is like a VR game, right?
Correct. And
Okay.
what makes it absolutely just wonderful, they didn't like shortcut anything or go in any sort of gimmicky direction that a lot of VR titles kind of go. They are treating Half-Life Alyx absolutely as canon to the main story. And it's a fully fleshed out world that you are exploring. not quite as big as per se like Half-Life 2. There is no vehicle combat or driving around.
Okay.
You're always on foot for the most part, kind of going through like the alleys in City 17. Um, but the thing I really need to urge in regards to why I think this is the game uh, is the fact that it is a VR title, and this is only. I can't stress this enough. It had to be a VR title. For those of people that say, "Can't we port it or mod it to be just a regular PC play on a flat screen monitor?" No, because the experience in itself is so well tethered to work with VR that the experience as a whole is just phenomenal. And I'm talking about like all the things that you can interact with in the world around you. They literally have like just so many little trinkets, bottles. You can pick up anything and just kind of interact with it, and those things will interact with the world around it.
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
In and of itself that it is a VR title, I think gives it a lot of points towards like being a great title and having it stick out on top of like just the game itself.
So, Brandon, I have a question for you. So, for Half-Life
Yes.
Alex, what makes it better than any of the other VR titles? So, obviously, there's a lot of VR titles where you can interact with pretty much anything. There's VR titles that have really good experiences, good stories. What makes Half-Life Alex, not just a good VR title, but a good game where it should contend next to all of these really good games this year?
Sure. I mean, as a VR title, it does set the bar for what future VR titles could be like in terms
so it's
of controls.
Kind of revolutionary in the VR space.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But let's put VR to the side, and how does it stack up against some of these other titles? The storytelling, as the Half-Life series has always been kind of cemented in, is still very strong with this. The characters you interact with and your progression through the game itself always kind of holds that carrot in front of you to bring you forward and try to see what's in the next kind of area to bring you around. And the acting, I should tell you, is just top notch, enjoyable, and overall just really well done.
I was gonna ask. So, like, I assume you played the previous Half-Life games, so everyone's very excited, very hyped for Half-Life 3, and then this game comes out and it kind of feels like, oh, is it still good? Like, even if you were expecting Half-Life 3, or is this still like, yeah, no, this totally stands up by itself?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I would say this does bridge a gap into what Half-Life 3 could potentially be.
So it's like 2.5.
A little bit, yeah. Now, technically, the game itself takes place before the events of Half-Life 2. It is, of course, it's called Half-Life Alyx. You play as the protagonist Alex that you meet in Half-Life 2. It kind of leads up to the events of Half-Life 2. But there's other things that occur. I'm not going to mention any sort of spoilers. That absolutely set
You can be a spoiler heavy as you want for this.
Because we're going to be spoiling this entire podcast.
Well, I guess I don't want to spoil it for you guys because it really is a jaw-dropping moment. But I will say this sets up for a Half-Life 3, and it absolutely tells me that Valve is looking into a follow-up. Now, whether it be VR or not, who knows?
So, okay, it being my, I guess my experience with VR games, like, pretty limited, maybe, like, on par, like, the average video gamer, perhaps. How are the graphics? Because I feel like that's definitely something that's held back if something is a VR game. How do the graphics translate for Half-Life Alyx?
They are amazing.
They're amazing?
They are amazing. Like, the game...
John just drops
amazing. I've never, like, played a VR game and, like, those graphics were amazing. Like, dude, those were graphics.
Thumper looks good.
You're like, it looked like a PS3 game.
Kinda, yeah. Like, that's kind of the benchmark. And I understand because graphical limitations, like, it's super new technology, but so they're amazing.
As long as you have the PC to support it, I'm telling you, the first minute you step into the game, it kind of you start off on a balcony.
To real life.
I mean, that's true for a lot of things. The initial vista, when you start the game, you're looking at the Citadel being built in City 17, and you see all these kind of iconic, like the Combine and the vehicles going by. And I mean, it looks real, very photorealistic, a lot of detail. A lot of VR games cut corners.
Oh, thank God. We can finally drop the F-bomb.
I mean, we're drinking too. So, listeners, we've got Cone and I have a gin and tonic. I see Ralph's got like a spotted cow. A beer only sold in Wisconsin. Brennan is drinking
bourbon and eggnog.
Eggnog?
Eggnog.
Festive, my dude. I love it.
My wife and I just started this. I think she came up with this kind of recipe or concoction.
Hagen bourbon.
Yeah, with a little bit of a nutmeg sprinkled on top.
Shit, you fancy,
You guys are fancy,
Very fancy.
That's amazing. Say hi to Laura for us, by the way.
We'll do, yeah. Let's give her a little shout out here.
Okay, so I have to ask, candid question, hopefully candid answer. What are some drawbacks or things you would like to see change in like the next Half-Life Alyx or Half-Life 3 if it is VR?
I'd like
Were there any missteps this game took?
The game was very linear, I will say. There's not really
what was the game time or like average time to complete the?
I think it took me about between 10 to 12 hours.
First VR game.
It is, yeah. And I was very happy. Like after like a 2-hour session, I'm like, okay, that was fun. Love to do more. I'm gonna take a break though. I think in the future, like it'd be great to have more weapons to kind of work with. Unlike standard.
How many did you have in this game?
I believe just the 3.
Oh, okay.
Because you kind of get a weapon, like you're given like your pistol. It's the very iconic Half-Life pistol, right? And you never like swap it out for a new one. You can't just like abandon it and get something new because you killed like a Combine soldier. The soldiers don't really drop their weapons. You can't obtain those. The weapons that they do give to you are like very scripted moments in the game. Okay, now here's a shotgun-like weapon for you to use.
So they're not really changing the game with their weapons.
Not really. Like you can.
Which I feel like Half-Life is kind of known for with like the gravity gun thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they have in the past.
Well, here's the interesting thing. So the gravity gun is not in the game, but you get something. You get more of a prototype of what the gravity gun is. Okay. You get gravity gloves, and if you guys played any VR title, a lot of titles have kind of like a teleport item to your hand, right? You just hold out your hand, press a trigger, and it appears. Yeah. Okay. So Half-Life took that a step further, and at first it's weird to get used to, but it becomes very simple muscle memory after time, and it actually feels much more natural than any other VR game, which just teleports it to your hand. And the way I can best describe it is you're kind of doing a flick motion. You kind of highlight an item you see at a distance. You'll see a little highlight, and then you kind of flick your wrist while pulling the trigger at the same time, and the item will fly to you. And then you actually have to press the trigger again to actually catch it in your hands.
Oh, okay, so it's an actual gameplay mechanic. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. Ralph, do you have this on?
But I was like,
I'm tempted. I didn't know it was canon.
But I don't have the cord, and so Brendan showed me how to do the wireless VR on the Oculus. It is a little laggy. I'm not sure how well it's going to translate.
Yeah, I'm a lot more interested in this than I was before, though. I didn't know it was like bridging gaps between the existing story.
Yep.
It's very interesting.
Well, so on that note, can we talk a little bit of the gameplay? Like, what makes this good gameplay on a VR headset, or just good gameplay in general for games?
Sure. I mean, like most VR games, and setting the standard of giving players control of what's their comfort levels for like locomotion. You can do teleport, or you can have full like smooth walking or turning and such. But there is no like crouch button in the game, which is actually pretty fantastic. So if you're in a firefight, you are literally crouching down and you're aiming over like the obstacles. Yeah. There is like light puzzle solving in the game, typically with you working with your hands, trying to move like levers, valves. Funny enough, that's always been kind of a staple of the series.
Yeah. Nice.
And avoiding things like the, I don't remember what they're called, but they're these little alien creatures that sit on the ceilings with their tongues coming down, and they look
barnacles.
The barnacles, yes, yeah, they have that in the game.
The Pikmin.
So honestly, like, what makes those guys interesting? They typically put them in places where, okay, you can't clearly make it through unless you want to waste your ammo shooting them down from the ceiling. But there's always like some sort of litter around. You can use your gravity gloves to kind of pull that litter to you, and the tongue will catch it as it's flying in the air, and then the tongue will raise up. The barnacle will try to eat that, and that's your moment to kind of pass through, so you don't get picked up.
Yeah. So I have a question, and I think you kind of briefly touched on this before.
Mm-hmm.
How long were you able to play in like one session? Because I feel like with VR, I can't. Like my eyes just feel like they're tired after like 30 minutes or something. Do you ever come across that? Would you find that as a limitation or no?
I feel like I've kind of built.
You're probably more used to VR than me.
Yeah, I kind of got my tolerance in VR a few years ago, where I do get a little bit worn down, where I need to take breaks. I blame my own physique and my lack of working out. So, like I said, this game will require you to like crouch down at times to dodge fire, and like I'll start sweating.
Yeah,
it's always like that.
Always burpees.
Half-Life Alyx burpees, man.
That's awesome. So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the longest session I've played in Half-Life Alyx was probably a 3-hour session.
Oh man.
Yeah. And that's probably where I'm like, I just need a break. My face is getting a little bit warm. The cushion pushing up against my face is getting maybe a little itchy. So
I would not consider that like a limitation then.
That's a good.
That's a good video game session, like in general.
Yeah.
So closing thoughts for Half-Life Alyx. Is there anything that you want to say before we move on to the next game? Like, why is this game of the year?
Because it's doing something no other game has done this year at all, or even within the past decade. It's creating new standards, not only for video games, but also for VR. And it actually boosted the VR market in ways that we thought the market was going to be kind of failing.
Can you elaborate on what Half-Life Alyx does that's so revolutionary?
As a video game in general, I think like the VR stuff is
VR in general is revolutionary, but what does Half-Life Alyx do that is
just as a game?
The sense of presence in a whole living world. Everything everything feels like it's set for a very specific reason in its place, and the way you interact with the world around you is so well grounded that you can really convince yourself that you're in a new reality.
Nice. All right.
Fantastic. Interesting. Okay, yeah. I honestly I know that was literally only the first game, but I feel like
honestly put that as game of the year.
No.
Let's slow down.
I feel like I want to put in the top 4 because like VR is such a cool thing.
Right.
Cohen and I have said this in the past too. Like when we first tried your place, like 2-3 years ago, we're like, holy shit! Like this isn't a fad. It's actually really cool. We hope it becomes more normalized, becomes better and better. And if Half-Life Alyx is like adjusting the bar to help games become better by setting an example like that, like I think it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, you were excited for fucking virtual reality Pong with your face.
Look at us now.
Yeah, dude, and then Super Hot nearly shit my pants. Love that game. So yeah, dude, Half-Life, like I kind of want to try it. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad you're on this episode, Brandon.
Oh, thank you. Happy to be here. And
couldn't get Ryan Seacrest, but hey, man, did Ryan Seacrest play Half-Life Alyx?
No,
probably not.
Probably not.
Is Ryan Seacrest a game designer with really valid points about game design? No.
But he's really good at announcing when the ball is going to drop.
Yeah, so. Always keeps you on edge.
Fantastic. All right, so the next game on the docket is Last of Us 2. I believe the people that have played it is me, Alex, and Cone. Brendan, you haven't played it, so I think you're a really good person to ask us questions.
Oh boy.
If any questions come, don't feel like pressured to come up with questions.
Sure.
Like if anything comes up organically, definitely shoot it out.
So I'll kick it off. I think Last of Us 2. I don't personally think it should be Game of the Year.
Okay.
I really enjoyed Last of Us 2, but in general, it's been a very divisive game, and I completely understand why it's been divisive.
Why?
Just in general, that I personally did not believe Last of Us needed a sequel. And so with Last of Us 2, it feels like something that Sony just wanted to do because it was a franchise that was really valuable. And so they wanted to keep on going with the story. Not that it's a bad game, but there's definitely some very clear flaws about the game. I don't think that the gameplay is revolutionary, the same way that Brendan has said that Half-Life Alex was revolutionary. I think it's a better version of Last of Us, but I think a lot of it was set dressing. Yes, you can crawl under cars. Yes, the animation for different people is much more visceral, and people call out their names. But fundamentally, the game is the same.
Yeah, I think the thing with Last of Us Part 2 is that it is just more of The Last of Us, but the gameplay loop has been polished to like a really nice shine. And I still think it's like the best in the business when it comes to stealth action, because a lot of games, when you're doing a stealth thing and you mess up, it feels like, oh, you messed up and like here's a game over, or like now you have to fight your way out, and that's like kind of a fail state. But for Last of Us Part 2 and Last of Us, the first one, it definitely felt like an integral part of the game design that, okay, you can stealth as much as you want, you can pick off enemies now that it's safe, but if you get caught, now it's a frantic gunfight. Like, it's still intense and exciting. It feels like part of the story. It doesn't feel like a failure. It feels like, okay, we're doing stealth, but now we're doing action, and that's always flowed so well, and that's probably still my favorite part of that game.
I would actually, I would definitely agree with that. I think a lot of that is with the enemy design. Not so much like their physical design or like how they look. It's
their
how
behavior.
their behavior, how they sound. Like, because they're always like yelling to each other, like, "Hey, flank them from this way."
Yeah,
like,
shoot him in the ass cheeks. They'll never expect that. You're like, no, I need my ass cheeks.
Yeah, and so like all while they're screaming, it's like you're hearing it, hiding. Like, okay, crap. Like, where do I go? Yeah. And so it goes from this pattern of like, okay, you're stealthily watching their behavior. Like, okay, I can go in here and then assassinate them. And then you're now listening to their behavior in like a different way, and it's a seamless sense of like being frantic in a gunfight. So I think the gameplay is solid. Like when you shoot, like you really like. I love shotguns in video games.
Shotguns are
and
always
perhaps
the
in
best
real life,
weapons.
I don't know, but shotguns in video games are just so satisfying.
Designed to be satisfying,
right? And it's so amazing. It's like that a stealth game like this can pull off such a satisfying shotgun shot to an enemy. The gameplay is it's really fun when the game, and we said this, we talked about this in our last episode, when the game actually wants you to play and like have a connection with like the character you're controlling and like the enemies, it shines. It absolutely fucking shines.
Yeah, so Ralph, like I feel like a lot of the divisive opinions about this are maybe with the story and less with the gameplay.
I feel so. I think in general, all three of us has enjoyed the story, so I don't know if that's going to be like a bigger issue.
I have my issues with the end of it.
Well, before we move forward with the story,
there's lots to talk about.
Right, so before we move forward with the story, I personally think, yes, you guys say that the gameplay is really good, and when they really want you to go in on the story or the gameplay, it's really shines. But I would challenge, there's other games that have better stealth mechanics in them. Like, even though Assassin's Creed has been going on, churning on multiple times, Assassin's Creed was doing that stealth gameplay well before Last of Us. Like, not to mention the AI for certain games like Hitman has better AI when it comes to stealth.
But I've never played Hitman, so maybe they do this. But the thing with Last of Us is very well. It's such a perfect marriage of action and stealth with gunplay. So Assassin's Creed is like stealth and action with melee combat dominantly,
right?
But like gunplay is a whole nother formula.
Yeah, I think
like sword clash.
I think it really does have that unique blend of stealth is good, bleeds into the action wall, bleeds back into stealth wall, like that. Going between those two concepts.
Like when you fire a pistol versus a shotgun, it feels differently for the player. Like I like as Ellie, it feels different. And then also when you hit someone, you can tell they're hit with a shotgun versus a pistol, and it's very polished.
Okay.
On top of the marriage of the stealth, so I think it's really the good use of like the environments and like the maps that they want you to play around.
I mean, of course, the environments are amazing, graphics are amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, like I really want to love this game. It's just I have issues with the gameplay was like the traveling from point A to point B, because the game basically just takes place in like this forested version of Seattle, and there's like once you've seen one set piece, you've basically seen how the rest of the game is more like for the either like you're above ground or below ground. Not like there's those two, right? For the whole like 20 hours.
It's funny you mentioned that because I that's exactly how I felt about the first game. Now, mind you, I haven't even the first game. I got maybe halfway through it.
Yeah,
and a lot of it felt like you got some of those cinematic set pieces in between long, drawn out sections of gunplay and stealth play. So I was gonna be a little bit curious and ask, does the second one have a little bit more diversity and move out?
less.
I think
There's
there's not
less.
as much.
There's
I don't
less.
think there's much diversity in the gameplay at all.
Yeah.
And one thing I did want to bring out, and Alex and I have spoken about this offline, is that he thinks that yes, when it shines, but there's a lot of just nothing in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
so
is. Yeah.
I'd like to draw a distinction between the walk and talks where you're in control and actual cutscenes, because I think cutscenes in games that you can skip, I'm always fine with, because if it's too long or if you've seen it before, you can skip it. But the thing with Last of Us Part 2 and also with God of War 20 edition, is that like I have such little urge to replay it because I know I'm going to be carrying a boar slowly for like 5 minutes, like carrying a tree slowly for 7 minutes. And I really think there's something to be said for, cutscenes kind of exist for a reason. If you want to do a replay, if you want to speed up the gameplay, like you can just skip it. But when you're locked into these moments of I'm walking, I'm talking, I know the story, it's like I kind of don't want to go through this over and over. So,
and honestly, with those parts in The Last of Us, I think we're talking about the same part where you're just empty transit from point A to point B.
Right.
There are some conversations, like let's say between Ellie, the dominant protagonist, and like Dina, her like love interest, where Dina's like talking and she's like, "Yeah, sure, yeah," and maybe that's like character development or like establishing a relationship. Kind of but it's like there's not any sort of world building in a sense. Like there is opportunity for that, and you do feel like Ellie does love Dina, but that's not really portrayed in that. Maybe I'm just overlooking something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think their relationship is complex, but I think like in those transit moments where there is like that dialogue, it's empty and there's not really much to take there. Versus like something like Final Fantasy 15, when you're traveling with the boy crew, like that shit's great.
Oh wow, okay.
Well,
terrible game. So do you want to move over to like story, because I think that's the primary.
Okay, yeah.
So that's gameplay.
So can we just talk about? I'm just gonna bring it up. The reason that the game was so divisive is because spoilers. It doesn't really matter. This is game of the year, so you can expect spoilers.
Yeah.
In Last of Us 2, they kill Joel.
Wait, what?
Yeah. What's awesome is I knew that if you've been a longtime fan series and you've been like hearing my playthrough, like original Last of Us and now Last of Us 2. I did know that they killed Joel, who was the protagonist who you played as in Last of Us 1. I thought that was at the end. Mm-hmm. Like, I thought that was like the huge spoiler at the end of Last of Us 2. But that happens in like the first 30 minutes and it kicks off.
Yeah.
Like, I literally called Ralph and Ben. I'm like, they fucking just shot Joel. Or Abby
How could they do that
teed him up like a golf ball and swung the 9-iron on his head. Nuts.
Yeah, so just to go back to it, so they killed Joel, and then it's an entire revenge plot of Ellie going to find Abby, which is the murder of Joel. You find out that Joel's the one that killed her father. And so once you get to Seattle, when they have their confrontation in Seattle, then you end up being forced to play Abby. So you play the game in her perspective. So you're playing the perspective of the villain. And then afterwards, after a certain amount of time, you switch back to Ellie. And then at the end, a lot of people have issues with the game because it's supposed to be a revenge plot, and Ellie chooses not to kill Abby at the end. So that's kind of a gist of what happens in The Last of Us 2. What are your issues? Did you guys enjoy the story overall, or are there any issues that you guys want to bring up?
Okay, so
this is rubbing his hands together. Let me tell you.
I just want to say, so the game length is about
too long.
Well, okay, I would say like 20 to 24 hours. That might be like the average game length. I want to say I spent like between 20 and 21. I don't know.
It depends how much you scrounge around.
I played on easier difficulty, so I never had to like retry sections. That might be a factor. So Abby's section is probably like 9-ish hours, roughly like half of the game. And so the issue is, so Ellie and Abby, they're side-to-side protagonists. They are enemies. They are foil characters, right? You're supposed to be they're supposed to be similar yet different in some sort of way. Like they're supposed to be directly what's the word?
Opposed?
Compared.
Yeah.
Compared to opposed to. And the thing is, when you play Ellie's section, then you play Abby's, their two storylines are happening in the same timeline, right? It's at Seattle day 1, 2, and 3.
So
after you're done with Ellie's,
spreading the same timeline,
right? Just from the different side. So my issue, and I'm going to make a hilarious analysis here.
Alex used to be an English teacher, so it's gonna be great.
No. So, or a hilarious analogy rather is Sonic Adventure 2.
Oh, no, that's what I was thinking. You're not even good enough to be my thing. Let me read those words. Yeah, honestly, writing quality, same level.
No. So
Naughty Dog should take some notes.
Ever just erupted and laughed.
So here's the thing: in Sonic Adventure 2, which is whatever that
game, a good game. You can say it's a good game.
That you play as Sonic, then you play Shadow. But the cool thing about playing those two storylines is they intersect frequently. Like if you're playing as Sonic, you always remember, okay, there's Shadow. Shadow is always relevant. He is like a plot point I'm going towards. When you play as Ellie, your goal is to find Abby, so you always have her in the back of your mind. When you're playing as Abby, you totally forget Ellie is even relevant to the Last of Us 2 storyline. And that's a huge issue because she's on the cover. She is the main protagonist. At no point in this game should I ever forget about Ellie, or should the game forget about her in a sense. She's only relevant at the very end when you go to the theater.
So I would challenge that because as a player, you already know that you're Ellie. You play the Ellie sections and you know what it has been. So when you're playing Abby, I would challenge the fact that I think Ellie is a constant presence while you're playing Abby. Because you already know
she isn't.
No, because
that's
you
wrong.
already know where Abby is. So like for instance, when you leave Owen and her his like baby mama at the aquarium, you know the pin's about to drop. That when you leave them, they're gonna die.
Right. Okay.
Do you know what I'm trying to say? So like when you know that you're going to the theater, shit's about to go down because you know that Abby, from Allie's perspective, shoots Tommy and shoots Jesse. So I think it's a constant presence of. I kind of disagree with what you're trying to say that Ellie's not a presence at all during Abby's section. I think she's a constant presence because you already know
she is only because the audience has played her section. It's not anything the game is doing.
Right,
she's not interacting.
But I think it's really there though because
no, she is only because
before Abby's.
I disagree.
I mean, you guys are saying the same thing. It's that like, does she have to be present in the game to count as a presence, or is it just we have knowledge?
She has no impact. She has no direct impact on Abby's story.
Like Abby doesn't talk to her or like meet her
or like even knows she's relevant.
I think that's the point though because Abby thinks
is that good?
So I think that's the point though because thematically, so Brendan, one of the themes in the story is what do you call it? It's like a cycle of revenge, and so unless that cycle of revenge stops, it never stops. Right.
Interesting. Okay.
So with Abby, I think the reason you have that feeling of like Abby doesn't, she's not even a thought in her head because in Abby's perspective, this is how I perceived it. It's over. So when she kills Joel and she lets Ellie go live, and because she could have killed Ellie at that beginning, she thinks the cycle of revenge is over. And so I think thematically, Ellie not being in her thoughts during her section, she thinks that whole thing is over.
I can kind of see that actually. Like that's maybe the point is that she's like, okay, cycle of revenge done, but it's like actually it's not done.
Right, and so the presence. What I'm trying to say that Ellie is a constant presence because as a player, you know shit's about to go down. So like when you leave the aquarium, you know Ellie is about to kill her best friend and lover, and a pregnant woman, and her dog.
And the dog, Alice.
Yeah, I think the thing is that like there's just not a lot of emotional weight when they have that confrontation though, because they're opposed to each other in the cycle of revenge, but it's not like I've always known it was you and like we've had all these conversations, we've had these battles. It's just kind of like, the revenge is there, but as two characters, they just didn't have enough screen time together. Like there was very brief and bloody conflicts, but then again, maybe that is the point, is that they don't know each other's story, and that's why it's so tragic.
Right?
So,
with Joel, Abby doesn't know what Joel looks like. Abby doesn't know who Joel is. Like, Abby doesn't know what Joel has gone through. But her anger and her rage, just the thought that Joel is the killer of her father, that's what pushes her through. It's a very, like you said, it's a foil to Ellie and Abby, where Ellie has that same anger, has that same, like, feelings towards Abby, regardless of how much she knows about her. So we're getting the Abby version of Ellie during that first half.
Okay, I think thematically, I can agree with that. Your assessment.
You just didn't like it.
No, I did not, because I think Last of Us has such a strong narrative, and it pulls on your like emotion and your connection to characters. So the whole time when I'm playing Abby's story, I don't hate Abby. Let me preface that. Like, I don't think she's a bad person. Like, Joel did very evil things, which I think is, works with the theme of Last of Us, that like good people can do bad things. It is what it is. So like, for her to kill Joel, like, I get it. Like, he chose one girl over the safety of the world. So I get Abby. Like, I didn't mind like seeing things through her perspective, just the whole time, because again, there's this detachment from Ellie through her whole playthrough. I just thought, but why?
Mm.
Why am I going back? Why am I saving these kids? Okay, yeah, I know she just cheated on Owen, or had an affair with Owen, and he like knocked up another girl. Why are you saving these kids?
So many spoilers, I guess.
Yeah, it's like Abby. Why are you going back to save these kids to do like something right? Why don't you just talk to Mel about it to actually make things right? So the whole time, like, and fine, okay, you're saving these kids that are in trouble. That's a good deed, but why? Like, why should I care?
I think,
and I don't.
Oh God,
and I don't.
Man, I feel like we should have an episode just on The Last of Us because there's so many themes in there.
Maybe.
I think, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you should.
Oh, I will.
Is that I think the reason she's going to help the kids is because she needs to redeem herself. Because in her,
But I understand. Okay.
Because in her bones, I think she understands that what she did was wrong, even though like in her head it was right.
Like, leave the kids behind, or
like,
fuck
killing
Owen.
Killing Joel.
Oh, so everything.
Right. So like, because like thematically in the game, Abby consistently has nightmares about her father being hanged, being gutted, and things like that. She goes to the same room, and those nightmares only started happening when she kills Joel. Okay, and so when she helps the kids, she stops getting nightmares, and so I think it's a way for her to cope with the idea that I'm not a monster because there's more layers to me.
Yeah, I think the thing with Abby is that like the broad narrative strokes of what they're doing with that character makes sense. It's just that I didn't find like if I were to sit down and play Abby's campaign, it was just called Abby's campaign, and I played through it. I don't think it was that interesting or engaging. Like the characters weren't really there, the plot wasn't really there. And I think that's the issue, is that Naughty Dog kind of had that setup of like, aha, now you're playing as a villain, and it turns out she has an actual backstory, and they're just like, yep, that's right, we did it. Like, it feels like they didn't aim high enough to have her story be interesting in of itself. It's just interesting as a comparison to Ellen. So that was kind of my issue with Abby's campaign.
And I've spoken to Alex about this. I think the fundamental flaw to The Last of Us 2 is that Last of Us 2 should have been a campaign just of Abby. Because with Last of Us, if you're going to combine these two sections, is that we've spent so much time falling in love with Ellie. We've spent so much time falling in love with Joe that you don't give us time to breathe to fall in love with Abby. So if Last of Us 2 was just a story about Abby, understanding her motivation, understanding her characters, understanding her nuances, and her relationship with all those people that she loves, then we would fully understand the scope in a next sequel to Last of Us, where you do a story where we have two opposing forces. Because never did I ever feel in the entire game conflicted about Ellie and Abby. I always felt that.
So you're always on Team Abby, gotcha.
I know. Ellie. That's the problem. So if you're gonna put this format, like Abby's a person, that's awesome. You, as a player, you fundamentally understand that Abby is a person and she has her own life, her own people that she cares about, but you don't care. Like you care that Ellie gets out of this unscathed.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I'm probably in the minority of this. Like, I liked Abby as a character. I like Ellie more because you have like two games.
That's the problem.
Well, I mean, that's like I think I don't know. Like Abby was fine. Like I understand why she's doing this. I just thought her. This was my idea, like my thoughts of like when as I was playing her story. I was like, okay, this is very good for world building, at the sake of scope of story.
Okay.
Yeah, I just thought it was too detached from Ellie's story. And then the thing is, like at the end, they like there's this, I don't even know if you want to call it an epilogue, like a final section where the two are finally intertwined, and like was the last part where they go to California.
Yeah,
and
Guy
like,
Fieri's there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Guy Fieri captures Abby, and the thing is, like that is totally like in sync, and just like this is amazing. Like that last gameplay section was like a 10 out of 10 for me.
Where she's fighting in the boat, or the last like gameplay.
That last like them going to California,
Yeah.
like trying to find the Fireflies, like, and it was so intertwined. It was so like relevant to each other's story. Like, why couldn't they do that during the first part? I think it would have been so much better. So I think they expand the world. That's great. I think the scope of the story is just too detached.
So where do we?
Those are my thoughts.
Where do we land on Last of Us then? Because I genuinely think that it is a phenomenal game to start conversations. Because even just from this conversation, like
Yeah, clearly, like we're all passionate about it.
different understandings of themes, or like where you see and like the flaws and stuff like that. But honestly, like I can't see it as game of the year because even though there's some really good conversations within that game, there's a lot of flaws for me fundamentally. That's the word of the day for me.
Fundamentally,
It's gonna be awful. I'm gonna hear this podcast and be like, I can't believe that so much.
As
Go ahead.
As someone who has not played this game, but just listening to your guys' conversation, I think my biggest gripe is why are these two characters, their names just so close to one
Ellie and Abby.
another? You guys are talking about this, and I was starting to forget who we were talking about. I'm like, wait, who was the girl in the first game? No, that was Ellie, not Abby.
Yeah.
Couldn't they just call her Abigail?
I love that.
Not
Yeah.
Game of
That
the Year
might
because
be.
their names
That's
are
probably
so
on
close.
purpose. Yeah.
So, like, do we need to just touch quickly on the ending? Because that was honestly my main issue with it.
Yeah,
Go for it, because that's your main. That wasn't my issue at
That
all.
wasn't
So
my
I want to hear it.
Yeah, so like, I get it that it was okay. That's the whole point. We break the cycle of revenge. She understands. Oh my god, it's all for nothing. I need to stop. But like, my dude, you killed hundreds of people on your way here to kill this one person, and she's like biting your fingers off and strangling you. I don't see how, like, in that moment you think, you know what? I found my inner peace. Like, I just did not buy that she would have that emotion at that point. Like, after so much murder. Like, people that were in her way, literally physically in her way walking, doing patrol, she's like, oh, I can kill that person. But the target of her revenge, the person that killed Joel in front of her, she's like, I think this is where I'm calling it. This one is a little too much. Like, I could not really connect with that part.
I think so at the ending, just as a refresher for people that didn't play, Ellie has a flashback to her last conversation with Joel, and that's the reason she would stop. Like she decided not to kill Abby. We don't. It's not.
Was that before or after?
That was during. So like during their fight.
I should know. I most recently
Yeah, I
played.
think it was during the strangle.
Yeah, so during their fight, Ellie's about to kill Abby. She's about to strangle her in the water. And she has a little glimpse of Joel playing guitar, and that was their last conversation.
Like that should make her angrier.
Yeah. So she stops. Right. So she stops killing Abby, and I think the reason she stops killing Abby is because she understands that like Joel's the one that killed her family, and so it reminds her that like if this doesn't stop, who's gonna come back? Lev's gonna kill Ellie at one point. There's just not gonna be any peace. So it reminds her that this cycle of violence is ongoing unless she decides to leave it.
What was awesome about that moment of gameplay, that's like the very end of the game, basically, is again when the game wants you to be immersed in it. It does a beautiful job. It's like every party in that moment was just tired of the violence. I was like, I didn't even want to do this fight. I'm like, guys, this is fucking stupid. Just please stop. Make peace with each other. Like, you could tell Ellie in a part was kind of like tired of going through the revenge, the violence, at what cost. Abby didn't even want to fight.
Yeah. Can we also note that my jaw literally dropped when you see Abby at the end? because Abby
Yeah.
is gigantic, like ox of a person that can like
Mhm.
break you in half because she's been tortured, because she's been starved to death the entire time. She's so skinny and frail that is so crazy that
It's
my
nuts.
jaw dropped. Like it was crazy. It was such a fantastic scene. But I do understand. I understand where people are coming from when it says you're going through this entire revenge plot. The entire point of this game is revenge, and you let this person go. Are you insane? This would never happen. So
Yeah,
I get the criticism of that.
I just think it makes a lot more sense from like a narrative or like theming perspective than it does in an actual grounded perspective. And like Last of Us is usually really good about like it's set in reality. It's very grounded. Like violence is very brutal and realistic and all that. So just it seemed kind of weird that in that moment it's like, well, theme works a lot better if it's this ending.
So I will say, I think in the main narrative of The Last of Us, Ellie wants revenge because she sees Joel die, and then that's all out of violence.
Mhm.
All right, and then later in this like epilogue part, her and Dina are living on a farm. Tommy, who is Joel's brother, says, "Hey, I have a lead. Abby is in California. We can go get him, like you said you would." And at this point, I think Ellie mostly goes there because she wants to find peace. It's not so much out of violence and anger and revenge. It's like I keep having these like PTSD moments.
Yeah.
Like I want them to end. Maybe this will do it. Like I think she's just like tired of it all right. Do you?
I don't know. It's just like rip those people in the middle over them. It's
No,
like, she's like
I
a little
get-
bit more violent.
I get that though.
Yeah, it's definitely up to her interpretation. It's just kind of hard, but yeah, Last of Us Part 2. It's a video game.
Yeah, and I will say like just the fact that we were able to have this
Yeah, I mean it's
this crazy
worth
conversation
talking about.
is
Yeah,
it's why it's up here as a nominee. So
for sure. The next one on the docket, I'll keep it short because I think I'm the only one that played it so far.
yeah, I have it purchased. It was $20 at Black Friday, so I'd be losing money if I didn't buy it.
Yeah, it's true.
Persona 5 Royal, I think, deserves to be on here. Honestly, I don't think it's going to get Game of the Year, but I do want to call it out.
Me too.
The reason Persona 5 Royal is such a fantastic game is there's an extra addition to the base game for Persona 5 Royal. There's an extra semester, and that extra semester is such a fantastic addition to the game. The entire theme for Persona 5 Royal is all of the pain that all of society brings on to different people. And so the way I'm gonna spoil this, and I'm so sorry, Alex. The way that it works is that they added two new characters in the game,
Right.
Kasumi and Dr. Maruki. Dr. Maruki is the counselor in the game, and Kasumi is the first year that joins the class. And so the entire time, Dr. Maruki is this social confidant where he helps and asks people about all of the pain and suffering that they've experienced throughout their life. And so when Persona 5 Royal kicks off that extra semester, you wake up and it's such a surprise. Everyone's dream comes true.
Huh.
So everyone's dream comes true. So all of you wake up in the game, you don't go to jail. What do you call it?
So at the end of Persona 5 base, you're like driving the main character
Right.
home.
But you're doing a new semester. And so when you wake up
Yeah.
in January after you beat the main antagonist for Persona 5 Royal, you everyone's dreams comes true. So for instance, you don't go to jail for being a phantom thief. Morgana becomes human. Futaba's mom is there. What do you call it? Uh, Makoto's dad is alive.
Ryuji's on the track team.
Yeah, Ryuji's on the track team.
Dreams do come
Uh,
true.
everyone is really fantastic. And so throughout the last semester, you find out that Dr. Maruki is actually a Persona user. And so what he ended up doing is that he changed reality to be a good
Like a real anime villain.
right. So it's like to be a really good place and a positive place. And what makes Persona 5 Royal a really fantastic game, and I think it should be considered for Game of the Year. I don't want to like drill to the ground why it has fantastic combat, a fantastic style, and fantastic gameplay. I just want to add the fact that Maruki, as an antagonist, you feel conflicted as a player to decide whether or not you want to beat them. So there's a good.
Those are the best villains.
Right.
They're the ones that bring up a good point.
Right. So there's a good and a bad ending. So the bad ending is that you accept Maruki's reality, and everyone just has a fantastic and good time.
Sounds like a good ending.
Which is weird because it sounds like a good ending, right? So like that's really cool and fascinating. Where like even the bad ending is a good ending, so it makes you feel conflicted as a player. When you do have the good ending, then you have the contrast of people deciding that even though everything is perfect and everything is fantastic, they make an active choice because the life that they experience wouldn't be where they are if they just decided to choose all those negative things didn't happen to them. So they wouldn't be as strong as who they are as individuals, as strong as who they are as people, if they didn't have that adversity. And I think that was such a fantastic theme in the game. And lastly, I don't want to spoil this, but like the other main,
But here I go.
the other main character that got added is Kasumi. Her story is so heartbreaking that it's crazy. Kasumi is actually living. Her real name's Sumire.
I knew it.
Her real name's Sumire. Her sister is actually named Kasumi.
Oh.
She ended up.
Now I know.
So just like a little backstory, Kasumi and Sumire are what do you call it? Siblings. Sumire is younger than Kasumi. They're both gymnasts, and so Sumire is not as good as Kasumi. Kasumi is really good as a gymnast. So she's about to be like the best gymnast in the world, and Sumire feels bad that she's not as good as her sister. She sees her as an example. Sumire runs away after practice, and Kasumi's like, "You're my rival. You're just as good as me. You just need to work harder." Sumire doesn't listen. She ends up running, and she walks in front of a car. And
Classic.
Right.
Watch out
Classic
for cars,
anime.
man.
Yeah.
So Kasumi ends up pushing her out of the way and gets killed. And so throughout this entire game, in just Persona 5 base game, you find out that Sumire, in her head, has been living a life as Kasumi.
It's like psychological trauma,
Right.
survivor's guilt.
Right. So she's living her life as Kasumi this entire time. Everyone treats her as if she's Kasumi, and she's not. And then you find out that in the epilogue in the game, which is after the base game, and you're slowly piecing these things together on why this happened, why that entire arc for her is so interesting, and her acceptance that yes, she got her sister killed, but that doesn't necessarily mean she needs to change her life. And
It is a good plot.
It was a good plot.
It's a fantastic game, and I just wanted to call it out. Cool.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still gonna play it. I didn't freaking buy it.
Yeah, I mean, you also were aware of Persona 4, and you're still playing that, so.
That's true. Yeah, I think it's just tough, and you're the only one who's played here. Like, does it have enough substantial additional content to stand among all these other games that are basically just straight up new?
Well, Persona 5 Royal's epilogue is longer than Last of Us 2 and Half-Life Alyx and
Ooh.
Kojima and Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's a 40-hour epilogue, so.
Oh hell!
There you go. Proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, I guess. But like the gameplay is mostly the same, right?
Right, the gameplay's mostly the same, but
Disqualified.
but the palace is very complicated and it's really cool. And I didn't even talk about Akechi. Akechi is like in the game too. Like he's not dead in this reality. He's alive.
Oh, they changed it.
Yeah, so there's like I
Oh,
said,
in the semester.
Right.
Yeah.
so there's I'm not gonna ruin that part, but like there's just so much wealth in this second semester. They added a new location, and it's not just this epilogue. They added more stuff in the base game too. So those are my thoughts. I think it should be in conversations for Game of the Year. You guys can decide whether or not we need to knock it out, but I think it needs a mention.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, everyone who's played it has loved it. I think it's fair.
Cool.
And obviously the music, the style.
They added
yeah.
more bangers at the end. It's great.
They add more bangers. Always a welcome addition.
All right. The next one, Ghost of Tsushima.
We can, let's jump into Animal Crossing
you
just to
you
bring
want Brennan to jump in?
Brennan back into the conversation. I feel bad that he's like sitting here.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
but then
all
you're
good.
leaving me out of the conversation.
I haven't
I'll be
really
honest,
played
I'm a
it.
bit nervous about Ghosts because that's one I do actively want to play someday. I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to hear the spoilers.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, we'll try our best there. Yeah.
All right, so Animal Crossing New Horizons, Brendan, kick it off. Why do you think it deserves to be in Game of the Year discussions?
Well, one of the hard things to say is it's basically an evolution of what Animal Crossing already established in the past.
Mhm.
It's a lot of the same stuff that we already know and love, but it evolved that formula a bit by adding a whole crafting mechanic and the fact that you're
Oh, the
on
DIY.
the DIY is like I don't know if I can go back to the older games and be like, oh, there's no resource gathering. I don't have to like collect rocks and branches.
Oh,
Um,
really? You didn't have to do that in the other
Alex
ones?
is like,
What do you mean you need to click
Yeah, that's surprising to me too. I thought
No,
that was like a core.
Yeah, I thought you had to like catch bugs and shit.
oh yeah, that
What
was
did you
always
do?
part of the thing. Going as far back as the original GameCube. But you know what? Like, what really makes this game its wholesome uh, candidate for the game of the year is the fact that it landed at the beginning of the COVID work from home
Yeah.
quarantine.
yeah.
You know, and this was just such a it's not a violent game. I think at the same time, we got the Final Fantasy remake that came out. We had I believe
Came out in
Doom.
April, yeah.
Yeah. So its competition was very like different, and everyone around the world was in a bit of a depressive state, and people were trying to figure things out. This game was an escape for that exact.
Yeah, you could go outside and interact with other people, and it was okay. In
Talk to
groups
people.
larger than 5.
And what's funny, like they actually have like you can wear a mask in the game that looks
Oh,
very much
nice.
like the face mask we wear. And that's what people were doing when you visit other people's islands or have people visit you. They have the mask on as just a little nod that we acknowledge what the world is right now.
Yeah.
But here's us
Oh,
making
yeah.
that escapism a bit.
Yeah, and then I guess also stuff like Joe Biden had an island, so like it's crazy in that sense.
There's a talk show in Animal Crossing.
Yeah, there's a talk show. One of the
Gary Whitta.
Yeah, he has a talk show on it. So it's being used in just so many creative ways other than what it was probably originally meant to be. Although I will say, one knock at the Animal Crossing series in general.
Yeah.
Do you remember the commercials for the original GameCube
Dude.
Animal Crossing?
I do
All right,
not.
listen, if you haven't, pause this, go to YouTube, and then search up Animal Crossing commercial. It was like the Real World, that MTV show, but with like Animal Crossing characters.
that's
Nintendo used to have some awesome freaking commercials.
Well, that was like 90s, like early 2000s had like attitude and edge and like whatever.
MTT.
It was really funny. I wish they would bring those back. But yeah, I think like in terms of like just 2020 in general, like you need to include Animal Crossing into this conversation. I haven't played it. My sister is huge on it. She's not like big on video games. And I know like other people who I would like never expect to play video games. They literally got a Switch to play this game, which speaks volumes on its not even just its gameplay, but just like its reach to people in these times.
I think I'm the only other person that played Animal Crossing, and now that I realize that I'm like the only person that played the majority of these games. With Animal Crossing, I never played Animal Crossing before. I always thought it was a stupid game. Like,
For idiots.
He's dumb.
but like, realistically, like I thought it was like a stupid game. Like it's a game about nothing. You know what I mean?
You're trying to get out of debt.
Yeah.
So like,
Like real life.
It's a hard sell,
I
right?
can't make my rent this month.
and, like, it was one of those weird things. Like, why would I play Animal Crossing if I can play, like
Real life.
right? But in amidst the pandemic,
Isabel.
it was just one of those things where I'll give it a shot. Everyone wanted to play it. I primarily bought the game for Samantha, and I got hooked on Animal Crossing. It was a weird thing because I never thought as myself as a player that's like one thing that you need to understand about Animal Crossing. You get as much out of the game as how much you put in. So it's not something where like they give you things to do. Like you need to decide what you want to do in the game. You want to make a nice house, go for it. You want to make a nice island, go for it. You want to collect all the bugs, go for it. They don't tell you to do that. You just decide to do that. and it was such a nice experience playing Animal Crossing. I looked at my playtime. I ended up playing it for 300 hours.
Oh god.
You're disgusting.
Yeah. Leave this house.
So I ended up playing it for 300 hours, and that's just on my save file. Samantha probably has the same playtime. So together we have 600 hours into the game, and that was something where we chose to do and we enjoyed. Brennan, like, what would you say that your playtime for Animal Crossing is similar to you and Laura? Like at that time?
Absolutely, yeah. She actually just recently surpassed my playtime. We're somewhere in the 300, like between 300 and 400 hours range. But she is
It's
ahead of
longer
me
than my
now.
Smash Bros. Ultimate playtime.
I think my Smash Ultimate still has more playtime, but that also had a 2-year lead.
Yeah.
But Animal Crossing is quickly catching up. We still play it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Mind you, I'm doing the most minutia of chores and just like daily tasks, and then I shut it off. For the
My
day.
island is a mess. There's roaches everywhere.
People are dying. Someone help me.
People left. But I think what makes Animal Crossing such a fantastic game is that for a game about nothing, it built such a big community worldwide. Like it was
Yeah, like the game outside the game, just
right,
really good
it allowed
community.
people to be together, and it allowed people to have that sense of community when you couldn't leave. And I personally think that I don't think Animal Crossing is you know uh like a game breaking game. It's like the best gameplay or the best graphics or whatever. But I think, God, Alice is gonna hate me. I think Animal Crossing deserves to be Game of the Year because it's
It's not
Hey,
Final Fantasy
you're allowed to be
7.
wrong. It's
I know,
fine.
because it helped so many people throughout the pandemic. It's not just one person; it's millions of people. Animal Crossing caused the Nintendo Switch to be sold out for 4 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just a different take on this. Like the closest thing I've played to this is Viva Pinata back on the Xbox 360.
Oh, fucking class.
And that was very much a thing where you wake up, you start a new day, you pull weeds, you plant flowers, you try to attract new pinata animals. And I think a lot of Animal Crossing's appeal is just that kind of crack kind of mentality of
Crack?
of you're addicted to it. You're like, dude, I need to keep improving. I gotta catch these bugs. I gotta get this going and make that go.
You're absolutely right.
And I think
Yeah.
part of what makes Animal Crossing a fantastic game is because the pandemic, everything was something that's so out of control, like something that was so out of our hands that we couldn't do anything about it. Things were falling apart. But in your little Animal Crossing life, you controlled everything. You get to.
You are God.
It's not even that. It was just like a nice thing. Like I'm gonna plant flowers today, and that's all I'm gonna do.
And you set your own goals, and if you don't accomplish your goals, that's okay. There is no um, penalty for not completing things that you aimed to do so. Perhaps you miss out on certain events because they do respect holidays and things like Halloween happens, and if you miss out on it, well, it's either too bad or you time travel. But otherwise, it's your call as a player as to what you want to do in that game, what you what you deem as a end goal for that game.
Yeah. And I think it's just a different lens in Game of the Year. Like I said, it's not
Right.
groundbreaking game. I think it is just the game of 2020.
Right. Yeah, if this was 2021,
it wouldn't.
Would this be in discussion?
It wouldn't be in the discussion. It would still be a good game in 2021.
Right.
I think because it helped so many people with their mental health, just making sure that they have just so much spare time during the pandemic that I think it is 2020's game.
Yeah.
Cool.
Interesting.
All right. Do you want?
Yeah, I don't. It's on this list for a reason. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I said it. Yeah.
Obviously, you're trying to push for Half-Life, Alex. What are your thoughts about Animal Crossing? Do you think those are valid points, or should it even be in the conversation? I know my take for Animal Crossing is very different than everyone else's.
You are absolutely correct, though. We can't ignore what this year was really mostly about worldwide, and that was the pandemic, right? And while many other games did serve as a distraction from the pandemic, this game was right there at the start of it, almost like it was a planned thing.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
not.
Nintendo's like, no.
It's true, yeah.
Period. It's
Lockdown,
over.
lockdown in America at least
Yeah.
was mid-March. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think the bias in me and the fanboy really wants to say Half-Life Alex. You know, that was just such a new
Oh,
experience.
I'm with you on the fanboyism.
Yeah. Like Animal Crossing was something that I returned to. I'm like, okay, I remember all these things doing in the past, and there's some newness to it and refreshingness to it. And that's where I start to say, is it really game? But again, like I said, it's year of COVID-19, and how did we deal with that?
All right.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
not drugs, Animal Crossing New Horizons. It saved us from drugs.
Okay. All right. On that note, let's move to Final Fantasy VII Remake because I feel like Alex is like loading up his gun. He's like, I'm ready to fight. We'll
Okay.
put Tsushima last because in reality, I don't think it's going to be Game of the Year. Are we in agreement on that? It's a very good game. We'll talk about it. But
Ghost or Final Fantasy?
Ghost of Tsushima. I don't think it's
Ghost of Tsushima is my objective game of the year.
Oh, you think so?
Final Fantasy
Is
VII,
that what you think?
Final Fantasy VII Remake is my personal game of the year.
Okay. So do you want to talk about Ghost of Tsushima?
Let's talk about Final Fantasy.
Okay.
Okay.
Final Fantasy.
All right, so I think the only people who play this year are Ralph and myself. But I think like everyone knows Final Fantasy VII.
It's a
2%.
7. Checks out. Final Fantasy 7 is a 7.
Get out of here. All right, so what I will say is Final Fantasy is a legendary and revolutionary game series, right? When you think of RPGs or JRPGs just in general, you think of Final Fantasy. And the reason for that is Final Fantasy VII. I think that is the dominant reason people know and acknowledge the series. And for a lot of people, especially our age, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, Final Fantasy VII is in their favorite game list. For a lot of people, it might be their favorite game. For a lot of people, it's like in their top 5, their top 10. And for that generation, especially, like if you're on PlayStation, you fucking love Final Fantasy VII. If you're on N64, the only competition was Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. And so when people think of like hard-hitting, iconic of that generation, iconic characters, it'll like on Game Facts, you ever do like the game battles?
Right.
Where you pull, it's always Link and Cloud.
Well,
Always Link and Cloud at the end.
if Cloud wasn't iconic, he wouldn't be in Smash Bros.
Right, exactly. Now they just brought in Sephiroth just to, because people know Final Fantasy VII. People acknowledge, people respect it, right? People even outside of the gaming industry and people who don't really play video games, they still like, oh, the dude with the sword, yeah, sure, Final Fantasy. Now imagine like that childhood love, that the thing that like you just
I'm with you.
you have super fond memories of, just remade in the ground up 4K with awesome battle systems, new voices, new voice actors, actresses, and with all new stories and like characters totally fleshed out. That experience you can give someone that Final Fantasy VII Remake does will never happen again.
Okay.
Maybe if you did that to like Ocarina of Time, but I don't think Nintendo will ever diverge that hugely onto a series. One of their flagship games.
Ocarina of Time will get a remake in 7 years.
Yeah, I don't know. And Link will still be voiceless for some
Yep.
reason. Yeah. The thing is, like, yeah, what Final Fantasy VII Remake gave to people, no other game has done in the past, and I don't think any other game in the future can do that. I will never forget. The demo came out, I want to say, like late February or March. The game launched a couple months later. I will never forget the jitters I felt watching the opening cutscene. Like I literally felt shivers, and I had the stupidest smile on my face. And I understand that's because I played the original Final Fantasy VII, and I have fond memories of it. Do millions of other people have those feelings? I would agree so. I think one thing that is negative about this game is that it is a bit like those awesome, irreplaceable feelings I have for this game are alienated to people who haven't played the original Final Fantasy.
Yeah, like there's no way I could ever get that experience. I didn't play it growing up, and I didn't have that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Same.
So as a player that played it without any backing for Final Fantasy, I tried Final Fantasy VII when I was younger, but the issue was I played Final Fantasy VIII first, And as a stupid young child, I was thinking, "Oh, Final Fantasy VIII looks great. Check out Final Fantasy VII." And then I see Final Fantasy VII, like these graphics suck. Throw this.
Yeah.
Well, that was me exactly.
Oh, really?
Yep, Final Fantasy VIII was my first Final Fantasy ever played.
Oh, small world.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Like, throw this game in the trash. Final Fantasy VII looks. What are these giant shoulders?
Yeah, my first was actually 12 on the PS2. Then I'm like, wait, these games are actually good. And then I went back and like played all of them.
Yeah. So to Alex's point, yes, when you do play Final Fantasy VII Remake, there are sections in the game where you're just not going to have a full appreciation of what's happening because they're changing so much in the remake that only a person that has played the past games would understand the impact of what they changed.
Meg too.
No, but
That's real though, yeah.
realistically though, because I enjoyed the game. I thought it was a really good game.
This game is why we started the podcast.
Right? Yeah. And
Oh, interesting.
and I like the characters. And Alex and I talked about the game for 2 hours straight.
Yeah, and then we're like, wait, we should do this every week for like industry news and stuff, and then that's how this happened.
Yeah. So, the only reason I had a full appreciation of the game is I ended up watching videos and learning about Final Fantasy VII and what was different. That I had a full appreciation of the game. If someone who played Final Fantasy VII Remake didn't have the time or didn't care to look into its pedigree or its history,
Lore.
wouldn't have the same love for what they did.
But playing Remake just blind for you wanted to.
I think
the fact that you wanted to actually research all that speaks volumes as to even just like a newcomer.
And I think the characters are very endearing. I really enjoyed all of them. Like they fleshed out some characters that didn't have their time in the sun in the previous games, and you really cared about the people in the game. The music was fantastic. The combat's really good. My main gripe with the game is that they padded the game, and I did not appreciate that. And I think that was a game developer choice. Like in when they I think there's a lot of flack when it came to Final Fantasy VII Remake because they announced that it was only going to be Midgard. And so it was a choice by the developers. We need to pad this game so that people don't get mad at how short it is.
Yeah, so the game is like 35, 40 hours, but only covers the first like 5 to 10 hours of the original Final Fantasy VII.
In an RPG case, that's quite short. Right? I think 35, 40 hours is pretty short for an RPG.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's
JRPG, yeah, I guess.
Is pretty short. Especially
For someone like me, that's very attractive. Like
Okay.
I do want to jump into this game, but it's hard. This is why I don't go much into the Final Fantasy like series, is because I can't stomach going into knowing that I need to go on an 80-hour one. Oh,
Yeah, like
100 hours
60,
plus.
yeah.
Yeah.
It can be very daunting as someone who has work-life balance, yeah, 180 hours.
But my main thing with it is that I think I would have enjoyed the game more if it was a little bit more concise. Like, sure, you got some flack from the past players, but if they just like ran the entire time, like battle here, go to this thing, like really cool story here, like really enduring story. Like there's sections of the game where you're like looking for cats.
Okay, so this is what I want to bring up. This padding you're talking about, it's side quests.
Right.
Emphasis on side.
Not
Look, the cats are side quests though.
sure they're side quests, but you are really directed to those side quests.
You don't have to do them though.
Mm,
You're rewarded for them.
Are not even important though, because like
Then don't do them.
it's like the side quests were kind of a tutorial to walking around in this open world. Why does it need to be open world?
I disagree.
What?
It's not even open world.
I don't know.
It's a town. You're talking about the Sector 7 slums.
So it's more hub based.
No, that's just a town.
Yeah.
You move on to like more towns. Yeah.
But then like the other later,
I think no. So I will say
even
because hold on. Yeah, go for it.
Even if it was a side quest design, they put it in the game for a reason, right? I personally think it's a way for them to pad the game, but they put it in the game for a reason. They're not good side quests.
I agree.
So why?
For the most part, yeah. So my issue, and I'll kind of agree with you. I'll extend your stance on the side quest. the game does a point to flesh out characters that were in like the original 10 hours of Final Fantasy VII. So like for instance, three integral characters, Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, they literally have like 2 lines in Final Fantasy VII, and now they're like fully fleshed out characters with full scripts, essays, whatever, and they're awesome. Like they have emotion, they're rounded characters. They're not just this. And I think the side quests should have pulled more to build the world better, because obviously they're doing a point to fully flesh out this Midgar section, and the side quests don't really do that. So I think like you can skip them, that's fine, but they don't really add anything.
Yeah. Music is great though.
The music is effing phenomenal. Nobuo Uematsu knocks out of the park every time.
Swearing.
Yeah, we can say fucking now.
Okay, yeah, the music is fucking awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love it.
I don't think it deserves to be Game of the Year. I think it's a very.
So I'm not done talking praise about it. Okay, here's the thing. We haven't even touched on half of why this game is revolutionary, and that is the ending.
Oh,
so it is called Final Fantasy VII Remake. And it's awesome because it pulls you. Yeah, it's a pun. Like
yeah, Japan loves that.
It pulls the gamer, the player in like this joke. It fools them the entire time because it is Final Fantasy VII Remake of the timeline.
Not the game.
It's not like a remaster, like a general remake. They are remaking the Final Fantasy VII timeline. So this is, in a sense, a sequel.
Yeah. So they're playing with expectations, and I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, they're doing like this is again playing off my original statement to open my case with this game. It's one of the most legendary games in existence. I don't even think that's a hyperbole. I think it is. And for them to make such a dramatic move with this story is amazing. It's a totally novel concept that has never been done in any game, especially of this magnitude. For them to say, okay, you have the original storyline. Now we're going to kill, essentially you kill the gods of fate, and everything that was going to happen isn't going to happen anymore, and no one knows.
Yeah.
Right, and so the ending is, it's definitely confusing, but you can kind of piece information like, okay, this is what's happening. There's some stuff I don't really understand that it makes you excited for what's going to come. Now, I will totally say, in terms of like sequels and trilogies, Square Enix blows. Like Final Fantasy X-2 is terrible. The Final Fantasy 13, 2, and 3 are atrocious. So the second and third games of this series might suck, but in terms of what this game is, what it has done in an industry standard, and what it sets up for, are fucking amazing. And it's never been done before. It's literally never been done before.
And I agree.
And I'm passionate about it. And I'll sit back now.
Your enthusiasm excites me, and I feel the desire to play it.
Oh, you should definitely check it out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brendan. It is, yeah, it's super beautiful. And the gameplay is super fun. We haven't even touched on the gameplay.
So gameplay is really good. I think the combat is really interesting and really fun. They changed it from a turn-based style, which a lot of people are turned off on when it comes to RPGs. And so I think this is it brings in a lot of people that are kind of turned off by that type of gameplay. It's not
That's kind of like me.
Yeah, it's not like a mashing game. You still need to think. You really need to think a lot.
Right.
Thinking.
But it does keep you more engaged than what you normally would do. Like, oh, use Blizzaga or use Tundra or use whatever. Right? You're actually engaged the entire time when you're doing combat. It's really good. One thing that I did want to bring up about this gameplay, and I'm scared that Alex is going to stab me.
Yeah, he's within arm.
No, in terms of gameplay, whatever gripes you have, I'll probably agree.
Yeah.
If not, have more.
I think that the latter half of the game, it felt very tired. The game started to become really, I don't want to say boring, but I just wanted to get through this section to learn more about the story, because I think the story was the most intriguing part about the game. There's a section of the game where you go through this like laboratory, and then you're split up between 2 party members, and you're switching between the two. And it just felt very slow and
Oh, I remember what you're talking
it
about.
felt
Yeah.
very slow and arduous. And I'm not gonna spoil it because I feel like Brendan's about to play this game. But that section was like pulling teeth. It was so slow, and that's what I mean by like there's sections in the game that I think they were trying to pad out because they're like, we need to keep this in Midgard, and we need to extend this section as long as possible, so that people don't get mad that this is game is short.
Okay. Yeah, I know what section you're talking about. In terms of like general padding in the game, I was always like entertained because even if the part in the story wasn't like the best as it was in the rest of the game, the combat was still really fun to me.
One thing that
So there's still like gameplay that was enticing.
padding, but also I thought it was genius and funny. There's a section in the game where you're given a choice whether or not to take the elevator,
Yeah, it's like 60 floors.
take the stairs. And I'm like, well, of course you take the stairs. You don't need to fight the enemies. That's the smart way. They literally made you walk up
What?
60 flights of stairs.
It's actually awesome.
And it's funny, but like padding at the same time.
Yeah, because then you have
like that.
Barrett who's like complaining the whole way that he's climbing the stairs, and then you have Tifa who's like trying to like bring up the morale. Like, all right, May, let's have a race. Like, and there is a race that go like there's like first, second, third. It's so funny.
So at least they
like
fill that gap with a little bit of like some banter,
And I think it's funny. But
Yeah.
you can take the elevator though. Like I did that in my second playthrough.
But like one thing that I wanted to know, like at one point during that, I'm like, haha, this is really funny. But at the end, I'm like, why did you make my climb slow? Because like as you walk up the stairs, I was just like, Cloud is so slow walking up these stairs that it's taking like you start out really fast and then they cut your speed down to half and then cut your speed down to half again and then cut your speed down to half.
This is those paradox naturally.
It's terrible. And then what I did have a weird sense of dissonance at that section of the game because Cloud is the super soldier. And so I didn't understand.
Dude, stairs are hard to climb up, though, to be fair.
Dude, 60 floors, Ralph.
I just give up.
Yeah, but it's cool. I think there's some flaws in the game. I think it's a fantastic game in general. Anyone who wants to play it should definitely play it.
Yeah, I think like overall, just looking at just in terms of like gameplay, narrative, it's very solid. It's very solid. But I think what is done for Final Fantasy VII fans, what's done to that game, is just amazing. Like nothing else has been done before. So I think there's a lot of novelty aspects being like revitalized, injected into this like 1997 game.
You make me want to vote for Final Fantasy VII Remake for Game of the Year.
Are you making fun of me or?
No, I'm being serious.
Okay.
Yeah, dude, me too. I'm totally.
All right.
Can I ask a question real quick
Yeah.
for Final Fantasy VII? So because this is an episodic set of games, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Does
Yeah, so like it has an ending, but it's also like there will be more. So like it finishes a story arc.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. Like, does it feel fulfilling
Right.
that you completed just an episode of
Yeah,
a game
I
that
would
you
say
know
so.
there's much more to? Okay.
Yeah, because they changed the whole game and like the full story of the game, that there is definitely a big clear climax at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, like the last like hour, 2 hours of the game are so epic.
Yeah. Well,
It's so cool.
Uh,
I was loving it.
I just want to know the boss fights are terrible. The highway section was so bad; it was so stupid.
Oh, when you're in the car.
Yes.
Yeah.
I hate it when they do that because, like, honestly, when I think boss fights, your boss fight should always be.
You can skip those.
Right, but at the end of the game, your boss fight should always be how did you improve as a player. And so when like developers add sections of the game where like this is an entire new section that you had no practice with and that is very repetitive, it's not fun.
Right. No, and they know that. So if like you can click start and then skip that section.
I didn't do it.
Even on your first playthrough. Yeah, I didn't either because like I wanted to do it, but they like
It's really
in like the Jesse bike minigame, like you can literally just skip it.
Yeah, but then you don't get a hug at the end.
Okay.
Isn't that what it's all about?
Right, and that, I mean, I understand that.
Yeah.
Like, I felt that way too, but the fact that they gave you the option to skip, I'm like, can I knock it on that then? I don't know. I don't know. Can't give it points, but can't really knock it. That's in my opinion.
Yeah, you can.
All right, next. Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh,
Last
actually, it looks like you forgot a game there.
I did forget a game. I'll probably put it up later.
Which one?
Oh.
Oh.
No, I was doing a bit.
Oh,
You see,
Oh.
I did not only play one game this year
Wait,
to completion.
what did you play?
Well, let's just say it involved Japanese.
Astrobot.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
She's trying to do a thing. You're trying to cut a promo. Okay. It involved Japanese high school students. It was a real long game. They had to solve a mystery.
You're talking about Persona 4?
The UI was really good. It had a really good art style.
Persona 5? Let's go.
What are you talking about?
That's right, my friends. I played 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim.
You did play it?
Yeah, it's super good.
Wait, when I asked someone if anyone's played it, no one
no.
said anything.
I know, that's where I was. That was laying my
you
trap.
You were playing a long con and waiting for.
You activated my trap card.
Yeah. And it's really
All right,
fucking
okay.
good. And
Let's tee it up for you,
Wow,
sir.
Ben, yeah, you get your own moment here.
yeah, so
Okay,
the
I'm
thing
so
is,
proud of you.
yeah, it's by Vanillaware. Is anyone familiar with their games?
They're
No,
like
I've heard of those
story-based
games.
games,
Yeah,
right?
so I've heard of them. I've seen footage of Dragon's Crown, like Odin's Sphere, like, oh shit, these games look fucking beautiful, but
that's
I've never
the
actually played them.
2D art.
Yeah, so then this shows up. Apparently, it's a visual novel. I'm like, okay, I can play that. I haven't really played a visual novel before. And it is just, like, one of the most interesting and complex and ambitious stories.
I can't believe we got trolled by fucking
Yeah, Ben with the law just sandbagging us this whole time. You played one of the most, like, it's kind of like the most iconic, like, JRPG in the year.
Yeah, because, like, it just, no one's really talking about it, and I was really confused, because after I played, I was like, dude, this game's really good, and people should be talking
Fight
about
for
it.
it, Cone. Fucking
Yeah,
throw
I
it
actually, like, I want to know, like, what the heck this game
Yeah,
is.
So
I'm
it's
actually really curious too.
The game is in two parts. It's a visual novel, and then it's like a top-down RTS, like, base defense kind of
Hate it
thing.
already.
So your visual novel is you're a high schooler, and
Of
you can
course.
get in giant robots, and you can fight
Checks
kaiju.
out.
And the RTS part is you're in those giant robots, and now you're defending the city from the kaiju. And what's really interesting is that those two modes totally work together. Like, it'd be so easy for them to get in each other's way. Like, oh, I love the story, but there's this shitty gameplay I gotta do. Or like, oh, I love this gameplay, but I have to trudge through the story. But they totally work because the visual novel sets up context for the battles. Then when you're doing the battles, it's like the climax two parts of the visual novel.
I'm so wrapping my head that.
These guys are so real.
When did you
Found
play
by
this game?
bullshit.
Because we've been having, like, regular conversations.
I know, I
about
just
it.
never brought it up, so I was like, I'm gonna bring it up at the podcast. It'd be like, why did he never talk about this until
we
right
are.
now?
It's also funny that Cone is the one person that plays this game that is everyone is saying is like the hidden gem of the year.
It is.
Yeah.
It's totally is. Like, in terms of like how much it's talked about to how good it is, it definitely is. Like, it's not perfect gameplay and flaws, but like the story that it's telling, like, I don't know where to start. The art's amazing. All the backgrounds are gorgeous. Like, hand painted 2D stuff. The animation's a bit limited, but that is because the studio they're not huge. They don't have a huge budget, so they have to make everything they got really work. Like, so they won't have animations, but they'll have really excellent sound design or like really good writing, or they'll reuse the background, but it would be super beautiful, so you don't mind looking at it over and over. So they can like really pinch every penny and make every part of this game like shine as much as possible. And I don't know, the story that it sets up, there is 13 different protagonists that you can play as.
That's a lot.
13 Sentinels.
Yeah, and like each one has like they do classic storytelling of just setting up a hook and being like, okay, here's this plot point. Why does this guy have amnesia? Why did he wake up behind a dumpster? Like, what is this chick? Why can she talk to this talking cat? Who is this guy? How did he summon a robot? Like, all of these characters have these like one plot hook that you're like, okay, I need to see what happens next. And you play through it, you're like, okay, but I need to see what happens next though. Like, it's really good in a page turning kind of way, and you always want to keep playing and going through it.
Which is important as a visual novel.
Yeah, because like stories.
Like of all these.
So that's what's interesting is that it's so complicated and like complex and stuff. So they have a screen that literally lists out the timeline of like what what happens. You can always go back and reference it.
That
But
sounds
you
like a
can
lot
jump.
of reading.
Yeah, you can jump between characters. So, like, you don't know how you're going to experience the story, but it still made sense and didn't feel like misdirected. It still felt like, okay, this is like a good story being well told, even though you were kind of in control of jumping around. And there are certain points that are locked, like, oh, unless you finish this character's story, you can't do this character's story, because they have a big revelation that makes sense for this. So, like, oh,
Come together, or like
yeah, so they interact all the time. There's, you see them
Unlike
as,
Last of Us 2.
yeah, so you see them as classmates, as friends, as lovers, as enemies that become lovers, and there's just a lot of dynamics between the characters, and it's just so interesting that, like, the only thing I'm going to say about the story is what I said before. It's high schoolers that get in giant robots and fight kaiju, but the story from that starting point goes so many places that I had no idea it would go to. And when I think about revelations and, big plot twist this episode, like, they are actually big revelations. They recontextualize everything. It's like, oh shit, like, this actually changes everything. And there were moments where, like, I actually put the controller down and I was like, oh my god, like, I was beside myself.
is it like Game of Thrones level, like freaking out?
Yeah, it kind of had those similar emotions, but it was less of, like, death and stuff, and more just like, oh shit, that's who that guy is? That makes so much sense. And you think back to previous encounters, and you're like, oh my god, yeah, that makes sense, because he was talking to her, and she was talking to her, and why'd she say that? Okay.
Honestly,
So,
this seems very like fascinating.
yeah, like, there's a lot to go through. You kind of have to, you definitely have to be paying attention. You can't just, like, blaze through and be like, okay, I'm gonna figure this out. But yeah, story goes crazy places that I did not expect, and as far as I can tell, things wrap up without any major plot holes. I'm sure, like, maybe if you come through in detail, you find some stuff that, maybe that doesn't check out, but as far as I can tell, when they, did big plot twists, they made sense, in the sense of the story, like, everything kind of checked out, and it was just, I don't know, very unexpected and very interesting experience.
So I will say visual novels are not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
A low percentage of people probably are into visual novels.
Yeah, it's mostly a book, because, like, the video game part of it, the RTS stuff, is very bare bones. It's like Pac-Man looking ass. Like,
Pac-Man.
it's like a grid system, and, like, your giant robot is represented as, like, literally a cube, because, like, they don't have the money.
Yeah.
What's weird is that as you're playing it, you get invested enough where you buy into it.
You're like, this cube is this girl.
Yeah, they have such good sound design, and they have cutaways to, like, well-drawn portraits and well-drawn animations of the robot doing it. You're like, yeah, when that cube hits that cube, that's a robot, punching the kaiju. Like, you actually get immersed in that way.
Wow.
I think I would not. I don't know. It's hard to tell if I'd be able to get immersed in that.
Is this voice acted? Like the?
Oh yeah, and the dub is phenomenal. Like,
I think what makes this game special is that there's 13 protagonists and the way that they're able to balance.
Yeah, like, there's so many plot threads going on, but they're all interesting. They're all good. They all interact. They all make sense.
So if I'm on PS4.
Yeah, I played it on PS4. I'm not sure what other platforms it's on.
I can see it being on Steam.
How long was it?
It took about 60 hours.
60 and half its reading?
Yeah, a lot of it is reading. But, like, you control reading analog books.
This is America.
But yeah, like, you control a character, so, like, you have a moving guy that you can, like, move across a 2D background. Like, so you walk up to people, you hit X.
I can't hear what Alex said. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I was having a real moment there. Yeah, you can walk around, you press X to talk to people, you have, like, a thought cloud that you can think about, like, food or, like, girls, and you can, like, read the text doing that. So, like, you do technically move around and interact, but it's essentially, it's a visual novel. You're just reading stuff. And that's what's so weird, is that I was still engrossed. I was like, I need to know what happens next, but then what happens, And, like, it comes down to the story. It's a story well told, it's very complex, but it still makes sense. The gameplay is fun. Like, when you're in the mechs, it's not complicated, and there's strategies you can exploit pretty early on, but it still has a sense of, like, drama, and, like, oh man, we're defending this, and, like, the characters still talk to each other.
They're clear stakes.
Yeah, so they'll still be like, oh man, do you remember that time we got ice cream? Like, I do remember the time we got ice cream. As you're, like, fighting in the robots, and, like, you're shooting rail guns and missiles.
You can't let them die, because then they can't get ice cream afterwards. You know?
Yeah, like, if people get seriously damaged, they'll be like, oh, are you okay? Because, like, I really care about you. You're like, oh, that's because, earlier they had that scene, they're getting damaged, and they care about each other, so. Yeah, the two gameplay modes work really well together, the story's great, the graphics, like the drawings are amazing, and I definitely think it's slept on. So that's why I wanted to bring it up.
I think that's
Yeah,
fascinating.
thank you for bringing it up. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Especially like because in the actual like video game awards that played a few days ago, I think it was a nominee for best role playing game. Am I right? It was a nominee for some award.
It should have been nominated for like art direction or something. Like sound design is something I never care about, but there's a scene where like you're cowering in a restroom and there's a fight going on outside, and you don't have the budget to animate it. It's super good. There's a scene where you're cowering in a bathroom because someone's trying to find you, and there's a fight scene going on outside, and they can't animate it because they don't have the money, so you just have dialogue and sound effects. And I was like really kind of scared and like tensed up just based on like the impacts and the sounds of like fists hitting stuff. I was like, yeah, I was like, this is very intense, and I'm surprised because I'm not seeing anything. It's literally just sound and dialogue.
The fact that I can do that is really cool.
Yeah, like
That is really cool.
that is a team of artists over there. Like they know how to draw, they know how to write, they know how to do sound design. OST is great. I have a lot of songs like on my playlist now, and yeah, I don't know. I really can't say enough good things about it. I'm sure there's a lot to criticize too. Like it'd be nice if more things were animated. It'd be good if maybe the gameplay was better. But for what it's trying to do, it totally succeeds.
Cool. All right.
It's a book.
But it is a book.
I'm gonna null everything you just
So
said.
keep that in mind. If you don't play visual novels, so like if that doesn't sound like reading's good, then you probably should.
So Alex,
Yeah,
that's
is that
interesting.
on the list.
No, it's I don't know.
Okay.
It's totally groundbreaking for it to like a visual novel to be in this conversation or like in the game awards in general. But it was nominated. I don't think it won.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was like on there, people were like, "What is that?" Like, "Oh, interesting."
Mhm.
It's cool. So I like in Japan, I have no doubt that like that game was a fucking banger
Yeah.
and it sold well.
Mustard.
Yeah, because there's 13 Sentinels is like a series. Like this
Oh,
isn't
is
the
it?
first one. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I know
There's
that.
quite a few. I've heard of. I know they're like super niche. I imagine they were visual novels, but I never played one. But yeah, so in Japan they're probably huge because they freaking love their visual
So,
novels.
For the next game, right, Ghost of Tsushima, right? I think we should frame this in a way so that Brendan can ask his questions, so that we don't glaze over things that he might care about. So, Brendan, do you want to facilitate the conversation to why Ghost of Tsushima is a good game?
Ooh, I mean that's a lot of pressure.
That is a lot of pressure.
With great power comes great
And
responsibility.
Cone didn't play it
Yeah,
either.
Colin didn't play it either. So, Colin, if you want to
Okay, Ghost of Tsushima. Why Ghost of Tsushima?
Tell us how.
Okay, so I will say, Tsushima is an island off of mainland Japan. It's in the maybe like the Meiji era.
west of mainland Japan, yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of like chronology timelines and like the Meiji or something like that, pre-modern, right? Before guns, it's samurais,
But it's
right?
not historically accurate. They're not going for historical accuracy for the game.
Right, like inspired by like history.
Okay, my
essentially.
main question: what makes it different than every other open world, crafty action attacky game?
I think my main thing is that what's revolutionary about the game is the way they do a map. There's no map markers in the game. The way
That is
they're
good.
doing
I
it
can
is
appreciate
this
that.
guiding wind. And so a lot of the way that you're finding things in the world is very contextual. And so the way they're doing it is that you flick the trackpad on the PlayStation, and the wind will just go where you need to go. And so
Yeah,
super
it's
cool.
if I could jump in, it's like the wind, as he's talking about, is a huge quality of life thing. On top of like it being like a cool aesthetic thing, it is such a nice quality of life thing. Because I heard a main gripe of, like Breath of the Wild is you're always like opening and closing the table thing. The
Yep.
Yeah, that's with most games. It's like you're always checking the mini map. Like,
yeah,
where do I
and
go?
so now you just swipe up on the middle, the Hershey's Kiss bar, the PS4, PS5 controller, and the window just like, well, like you need to go this way without
will
opening and
always-
closing anything.
I will always appreciate a game that can find a different way on the HUD to take those elements away, but still convey the message to you as a player as to what
A
to
sense
do.
of novelty, yeah.
Yeah, like Dead Space did that really well. It didn't have an HUD. Your health was on your back. Your stasis meter was on your back. You could
That's a
press
good-
R3 and like look on the ground. So that was a really cool part of that game as well.
You said not out. Give a shout out to Dead Space.
Dude, I'm just saying it's relevant and it's good and it's dead. So that's great. I'm glad I
Yeah, so I think that's really the interesting part about the game. That's what sets us aside from all other open world games. And then the other thing too is that it has that Witcher 3 quality where all of the side quests in the game is
Good.
they're very good, right?
Yeah.
There's like the lower level side quests where just like you clear out an enemy and like whatever. But for the more sizable ones that have multiple threads to them, you really get invested in the motivations that you're trying to recruit to your
Yeah, so I want to say there's like maybe around like 6 people.
Yeah.
They're key secondary characters in Jin Sakai is the main character, his journey. And these characters, they have like 9 steps to their personal side quests. And across like the 9 side quests they have, there is like an overlying narrative. And you get closer and closer to the conclusion of that narrative with their side quests. And then there's standalone side quests that are also talking about like, hey, clear these bandits, they're like up my ass or something. Yeah, and I think like even those standalone side quests that is just like clear the bandits, like kill these wolves where they're stealing fish. Obviously they're not groundbreaking in any sort of narrative way.
Why you're doing it.
It is still world building, and the combat's so fun.
Yeah.
I would never get like, okay, cool, like I'll do this fetch quest because like the combat is so like you need to be always paying attention to it. It's fun, it's flashy. It is like a samurai movie. That's kind of what it like tried to be in some senses, and it always like has that payoff. Like I'm a freaking cool samurai.
And then one thing I also wanted to note is that it's a little bit of I guess this is light spoilers. One thing that I really appreciate about the game is that throughout the beginning of the game, you are constantly bombarded with a samurai code. So they're telling you, hey, you need to fight with honor. You need to tell people when you're there and you want to you, like fight them head on, no sneaking. And so
Interesting.
the whole conceit of this game is that you are a samurai and you're slowly becoming more disgraceful because you're starting to lean into being an assassin. And so, as a character, you're starting to get conflicted on what you were taught being honorable, being, face your enemies head on, and then slowly becoming the ghost of Tsushima, where you are killing them and stabbing them in the back. So, there is a good balance of you shifting your gameplay styles and how it affects the story and how it affects the character.
Does the aesthetic or like the artistic goals of this game ever get in the way of playability or readability?
No, I think everything is very clear. The UI is really great. And I always felt in control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in terms of just like the environment is gorgeous. It's actually jaw dropping. There's like an opening sequence where you're riding through like this grass field. And again, that's like a gameplay moment that I'll never forget. Like my jaw drop. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this cinematic is amazing. But then you're like, wait, that's everywhere on this island. Like the fact that they're able to do that is still mind blowing to me. And I've had people who are listening to this podcast. They're like, Alex, I played Ghost of Tsushima because you're talking about it such a great length in the first episode. I'm like, dude, tell me about that. The first title sequence. He's like, yeah, it was fucking awesome. Yeah. So I'm like, I feel validated.
Ghost of Tsushima is the windiest game in the entire world.
Right. It can be okay. So I will say it can be like a little extra with like like the classic like samurai aesthetic. Like this is dramatic. This is epic. Whatever. Sometimes it does go a little over that, but I think it's intentional. I think it's deliberate. Like there are points where you do like one-on-one samurai fights. There's like a cutscene, and you feel like such a badass samurai. They do like the little sheath of the sword. It pops up. It closes. It uses like portrait mode on your camera. Like it's so cool. Yeah,
I think Ghost of Tsushima is a fantastic game, and I can't believe you're trying to say that this is your objective game of the year when you gave it a 7.5.
No, I gave it an 8.5.
Yes, that conversation from
it was 8.5
months ago.
But so I think and the gameplay is super fun. I don't think it's like the most challenging, but like I love like dodging, parrying, like those Souls like Dark Souls like elements.
It's not like hard where it would alienate people.
No, yeah, I think it's totally fine, and I think there are difficulty settings if you did find
The
that.
thing I didn't want to add about Ghost of Tsushima is that they added Ghost of Tsushima Legends free of charge.
That's why I think this should be Game of the Year.
Is
that a DLC?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not even just DLC. So Ghost of Tsushima Legends is imagine your Destinies, imagine your Anthems, imagine
I don't want to.
what do you call it?
You can't make this.
But they literally added like a melee class based campaign and multiplayer mode and a raid mode free of charge after the game. And it's not small. It's very sizable. It's a
Yeah.
very big chunk of the game. Like
It's actually polished. They brought in. Have you seen Avatar?
The movie or the anime?
The Last Airbender. They brought in Uncle Iroh's voice actor to be the narrator.
Isn't he dead?
Not anymore.
He's back,
They brought him
everybody.
back. For the,
yeah, but I do want to note that extra stuff they did not need to do, and it actually adds to the game because it adds supernatural elements to it. So when you're playing that DLC or like multiplayer content, it feels fresh because the enemies react differently.
Yeah, there's a. They'd spoken with some of the Sucker Punch devs, and they said for the mainline narrative, they wanted to just focus more on it being grounded in reality. So obviously, it's in pre-modern Japan, so the mythological aspects are there. Like some of the stories, like oh man, like there's this god that would like set your weapon on fire. And then you go through that side quest, and it was just like a dude who just ignited his sword. Literally, it was nothing crazy. But there's still like those mythological elements, but still very much grounded in reality. Whereas this, the multiplayer option that they introduced, that game mode, yeah, like it's full on steeped in the fun Japanese mythology that is there. So it's totally cool. Didn't need to add it. It's free. It's polished.
Yeah,
like it's better. Like this free game mode is better than Avengers, which is so sad.
Get that dunk in there.
Yeah, it's good. So on that note, I just want to do some special mentions that are not on this list. I want to mention Hades. Hades is a fantastic indie game. I personally think that it should be on a Game of the Year conversation, but based on like what we're talking about, I don't know if it would do well in this conversation.
It wouldn't. It was fun though. It was fun.
It's a really good thing. It's one of those things where Hades is a roguelike game where they allowed you to keep on like wanting to keep on playing that game. So Hades, I think, should be mentioned. And lastly, I think Astro's Playroom really also needs a mention as well because it has such. It is the reason Astro's Playroom is the reason that I constantly look for games that have DualSense support.
Yeah,
it's such a good showcase for PlayStation 5's new controller that I want to look for other games that have anything even close to what Astro's Playroom offers.
I agree to that.
Cool. Brent, have you had a chance to play Astro's Playroom?
I have actually. Like a week ago, I tried it out. I played like maybe through 2 of the zones, and Ralph,
So cool.
you gave me a quick tease of it. I believe it. I'm like, wow, okay, this is revolutionary, and I want this on all controllers moving forward.
Yeah, just the fact that
you feel different when you walk on sand compared to when you walk on grass.
Yeah, it sounds so stupid, but it's real.
Yeah.
It's real.
Takes me back to when the Rumble Pack on the 64 was.
Oh,
that thing was massive too.
Love it. Yeah, it was like back how you're just like tilting down. Man.
All right, so here's the fight. What are we doing? Where's the list going?
Okay.
I just want 13 Sentinels in 4th place.
Whoa.
No.
Okay.
Oh. Well, man. Is this how it's gonna be?
All right, I'm just gonna write out some stuff. What are our top contenders? I honestly think Animal Crossing, Ghost of Tsushima, Half-Life Alyx, and Last of Us are. Oh, all of these are great. So I don't know.
Yeah, we're just listing the list again.
Yeah.
All right, what's on the short list?
What do you mean it's on a short
Top
list?
3. Who's fighting top?
Oh, okay.
Top 3.
Okay, so I think in some sort of capacity, Animal Crossing: New Horizons needs to be on there.
Yeah, and in the same way, 13 Sentinels.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're doing top 4, right?
Yeah, we're doing top 4. So Animal Crossing. I think Half-Life Alyx should be on that list just because it changes so much.
VR. I would agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Should be in the top 4, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. Let's just do which 4 we think.
How do we feel about FF7, Ghost of Tsushima, and Last of Us? Who's dropped them? I'm gonna concede Persona 5 Royal. It's a fantastic game. It can't go in top 4.
Okay.
Coming from my perspective, again, I didn't play either of those 3 games. If one had to drop, I'd honestly say Last of Us.
Whoa.
Ooh.
I'll take it.
So I think we didn't even talk about all of, like, the themes embedded in the narrative. I didn't talk about, like, the views of, like, sexuality and, like, masculinity, femininity in the game, like, because we were just dragging on that conversation, to be honest. I mean, it was all substantial, but, like, I didn't want to keep talking about it. I would love to keep Last of Us 2 in the top 4.
Okay. So who's dropping? Final Fantasy VII Remake?
No, never.
So
Ghost of Tsushima's Dunsky.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, how much amazing things we do have to say about Ghost of Tsushima. Because, I mean, looking at this, all these games bring in, like,
something
an awesome new revolutionary novel thing. And I actually don't think Ghost of Tsushima really does. It just does everything well, but it's like nothing new.
Everything, like, let's say, like, everyone's out, like, 1 out of 10, and then everyone has their proficiencies. Like, Last of Us has, like, a 10 in story, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think Ghost of Tsushima is 8 across the board. You know?
Yeah.
8.5.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
Right.
Or drop it like it's hot.
Okay.
Which is crazy, because
All right. So we have... So this list, I think, is going to be...
But what do you think about Last of Us 2 being in the top 4 then?
Yeah, I'd like it to be there. I think just the amount of discussion and like how much people have to say about it kind of...
We were super heated about it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because of the gin and tonic, but...
I think we were super heated on it because we cared so much about the story. I personally did not enjoy my experience with Last of Us, but I recognize...
I really like the gameplay.
Yeah. Like, it's a game, I think, well, it's a series, I guess, like 1 and 2, that I think people should play.
Right. I think the way that
Thanks,
I'm thinking about this is that 10 years from now, am I going to remember this game?
Last of Us 2?
Yeah. And I think
I would say yeah.
I would say I will too. So, like Animal Crossing New Horizons, I'll remember, like, remember that one time COVID?
Yeah, remember 2020?
Yeah. Half-Life Alex.
For better.
One of those things where, like, with Half-Life Alex, I think VR is going to be in the future and how it's going to like innovate everything else. The way that I think the reason Half-Life Alex should be here is a lot of other developers are going to use it as an example.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that Bren brought it up, and I love that we're having it on this list.
And I think Ghost of Tsushima 2 is gonna. It's just not there yet. I think Ghost of Tsushima 2 is what is going to be their big coming out party.
Want to phrase that a little differently?
No, it's good. It's good.
We like you the way you are, Ghost of Tsushima. Just be comfortable with yourself.
All right, so right now we have Half-Life Alex.
RIP 13 Sentinels.
Yeah, so now the last one we just need to put in is 13 Sentinels. We got a list, baby. We got a stew going.
I respect it.
Yeah, you respected it enough to put it in top 4, asshole.
No.
You'll see. You'll all see.
All right, so I don't think 13 Sentinels should be on there. I think it's fascinating. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, if you like reading, then this is the place to be.
That's going to be the breakout. It's 60 hours. It's a book.
My work per minute is not going to give me a 60-hour experience.
All right, so I am.
This is a travesty.
As one.
As one, I don't know. I'm honestly not bought into this whole Animal Crossing thing. I didn't play it. I see its effect on the world, but
that's the thing. Like, dude, its effect on like the world, like outside of just gamers, is
palpable.
Like,
I guess it depends how you want to judge it.
If
I'm
we
not going to
spin
stop you. I'm just one man.
Yeah, if we spin it that if the quarantine didn't happen, honestly, I don't think I would say Animal Crossing would be.
You traitor!
No, but that's no. But what he says is relevant, and the fact that quarantine did happen.
But what I'm trying to say is that the game of the year of 2020
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
COVID did happen, and that's what made Animal Crossing very relevant for this year. So that's why I do agree.
Ooh,
I just wanted to point
I
out.
take back my trader comment.
No, I knew where he was going with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's fair enough. I'm all right with those picks. What's the fourth one?
Yeah, I think because the thing is, when we're looking at these, it's like it's not just the game, like it's its
It's the
impact.
It's its
Right.
impact.
And so I think Animal Crossing does deserve one. I'm not happy about it.
I don't think anyone's happy about it.
Yeah, Sam is gonna lose her shit. She was pulling for this one.
I can't believe 13 Sentinels didn't make it.
I can.
Hey, Fall Guys should have come out in March, and then they would have had that spot.
Yeah, this could have been Fall Guys' big day.
Yeah.
Instead, it's lost to history.
No, then the servers would have just exploded. They wouldn't have just shut down. They would have exploded.
We take those. We take that 1-0.
Animal Crossing New Horizons.
Alright, number 2, you guys go fight it out.
You don't even care anymore.
2 is. I feel like Half-Life Alyx should be that.
I
I'm
think
like-
I'm down.
I'm
for
like
that.
excited about this game that I haven't played yet.
Yeah.
Because I haven't. Yeah.
I
really like the
I'll
Half-Life series.
Half-Life Alyx so that you guys can try it out while you're here.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay, so Last of Us 2.
I want to put Final Fantasy 7 3.
Really?
I'm not putting Last of Us 2. Like, there's so many.
You really just don't like Last of Us Part 2.
I really enjoyed Last of Us Part 2. I think there's a lot of conversations that were made, and I think it's like a very good game. There's just so many gameplay flaws and structural flaws in it
Yeah.
that I can't push it past.
I mean, yeah, so my thing is, I feel almost like guilty pushing Final Fantasy VII Remake past the top 4 because, like, I'm a Final Fantasy fanboy. Literally, it's not a surprise at this point. Like,
Yeah, the election was rigged.
yeah, like
Stop the vote.
I did play Final Fantasy VII, like, original, and, like, I do have those fond memories. So, like, my view is bias. And it's different than, like, someone who, the average player,
Right. I think my point with Final Fantasy VII Remake is that I was not a Final Fantasy VII person, but you made me want to, like, look. Not even you. The game made me want to.
Yeah, now you didn't do shit.
No, forget you.
The game made me want to look at what happened so that I fully understood the impact of the game. And so I think there's something to be said about that. I think The Last of Us Part 2 is a fantastic game and it's a really cool story and it's interesting. I don't think it needed to exist. I don't think it has anything too much to say about it. I think it has really good themes and thematically it's a really cool story and game. But like Final Fantasy VII Remake at its core has more longevity and has so much more to say in the future on game design and how game developers and game creators can subvert people's expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we can do that at 3 and then Last of Us is at 4.
I'm a winner.
Brian, are you good with that?
Yes, and actually, I was going to point out, going purely based on our conversation, Final Fantasy VII is the one that I want to play much more than I would want to play Last of Us.
Nice. That's actually a good metric. Yeah.
Fantastic. So our game of the year is Animal Crossing New Horizons.
Begrudgingly.
Followed by Alyx, and then Final Fantasy VII Remake and Last of Us 2.
And then 13 Sentinels.
Number 5.
What are you doing?
Number 5.
We in there.
Persona 5 Royal and Ghost of Tsushima as honorable mentions.
Are in the trash can, yep.
Yeah, honestly, like, all 7 of these games, if you're looking for some stuff to play, highly recommend them. Yeah. If you're looking for a nice book, play 13 Sentinels, I guess Rim, I guess. A real page turner.
Well, I had such a fantastic time today.
This is a great time.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone who joined us for our Game of the Year discussion. As always, if you have any questions or things that you wanted us to help out improve the podcast, please send that over to professionallycasualgamers@gmail.com or message us on our Twitter and Instagram @professionallycasual. That's it for today, and we hope you stay safe. Have a fantastic holidays. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.